I think the Celtics ship has been sinking the last week or so. I mean, Boston has not been playing well as of the last couple of days. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Boston is on what, like a 4 or 5 game skid right now. Excuse me, they're on a 2 to 3 game skid right now. I misread. I apologize. And they're just, they're solely relying on Jason Tatum. I mean, it's hard. And Jason Tatum's been kind of carrying the load alongside Jaylen Brown, and the loss of this man, like Kyle said, probably their best two-way player on the team and one of the best in the league. So you're losing just under 25 points a game. He's scoring 24.7, 6 boards, 3.4 assists, shooting just under 49% from the field and a hair under 40% from the three-point line. It's hard to replace that, and for someone to have to step up and do what they have to do off this very thin Boston bench is a tall task. And I mean, the Eastern Conference playoffs, they're heating up in the next couple of days. I mean, we're on the tail end of the season, about maybe 4 or 5 games, depending on what team we're looking at here that's left in the regular season. Obviously, Boston is currently sitting at the 7th seed, Charlotte right behind them by 2 games in the 8th. Obviously, Washington 1 game behind them with the 9th seed, and the Pacers half a game behind the Wizards. So, I mean, like, the final 4 seeds are relatively within 3.5 games of each other. Mm-hmm. And it's just going to get crazy. So the play-in tournament, if I'm being honest, I don't think Boston comes out of that. I don't think Boston gets away from the play-in tournament, because they're going to play Miami, who is 2 games ahead of them tonight. And I think with the loss of Jaylen Brown, I really think that Miami's going to take it to them. Miami won their matchup earlier this weekend, I believe, at a score of like 130 to like 124 or something like that, really close. But Miami was able to hold them off. And Miami's been playing really well as of late. 7-3 in their last 10. Obviously, Boston being 4-6 in their last 10, and now their loss of one of their star players. I just don't see Boston having enough in the tank, unless we talked about it before the episode, unless we get like 40 to 50 points from Jason and we see UConn Kemba Walker. I don't know if Boston's going to have enough to make a dent in this postseason, let alone make it out of the play-in. Obviously, the Hornets have LaMelo Ball back, and they have a pep in their step as of late. And obviously, the Washington Wizards are one of the hottest teams in basketball right now. They're 7-3 in their last 10. Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal are just playing out of this world. They're putting up my player-esque numbers in their last couple of weeks. So, I mean, the two of them together is a scary combination against anybody, and we'll get into that in a minute. But in regards to Boston, I genuinely don't believe that they're going to find a way to come out of this play-in tournament, and I don't think that they even come out of it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think this Jaylen Brown injury just kind of encapsulates Boston's season in a nutshell here. It's just been a struggle the entire season for Boston. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I don't think they have any shot to get out of the play-in tournament. I don't see it here. And when I look at this team, I remember we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. They needed Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to consistently score to keep Boston competitive in a pretty solid Eastern Conference. And they were able to do that. And then obviously now we got Jaylen out of the lineup with his wrist injury. And I just don't know where they're going to be able to get the points from. They could maybe look to Evan Fournier to maybe try to replace some of the production that Jaylen Brown brought to the team while he was on the roster.
He's so subpar, though, since they got him.
I will say this. He did have a game, I want to say last week when I was on vacation, where he did drop 30 points. So I don't necessarily think that offensively they're going to be so anemic that they can't score. I think they're still going to be able to score a decent amount of points. It's just that defensively,
it's going to be on the other end.
It's just going to be really tough because, look, they gave up 130 points to Miami just a couple of days ago. I mean, don't get me wrong, Miami's a really solid team, but 130, that's a lot of points for Miami to score in one game. They gave up over 120 to the Bulls. They gave up almost 130 to the Trailblazers. They gave up 140 against the Spurs at the end of April. Granted, that was an overtime game, but still, you're giving up a lot of points in the process here.
And that's with Jaylen in the roster.
And with Kemba. Kemba's, granted, he's a defensive liability for the most part, but he can go out there and score. It's just This team does not have those knockdown shooters like Brooklyn has. Brooklyn's only there simply because they have Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. Those guys are all knockdown shooters. Boston has a couple in Jason Tatum. Kemba is decent in spurts, but he's been inconsistent this year. And Jaylen Brown, outside of Jason, was the most consistent player for this Boston team. And now that he's out of the lineup, I think it could really mess up the chemistry here. I think that they could still be a competitive team in the play-in. I don't think they're going to get absolutely scorched in the games that they could potentially play in that play-in tournament. But it really does look like Boston's season is going to end pretty early this year. And it sucks because I really do think that this is a good team as far as like the top end of the roster goes. It's just the back end of the roster really is weak. And that's something that I think
it's just crazy.
Yeah.
Because when you really look at it, the play-in situation, if it ends today, Boston would face New Orleans. Excuse me, these habits. Boston would face Charlotte and Washington would face Indiana. If we're just looking at it blow for blow, I don't know if Boston has enough firepower to combat Miles Bridges, Gordon Hayward, and LaMelo Ball coming back, and even Terry Rozier. They're playing very good team basketball. Obviously, they're 5-5 in their last 10. But since LaMelo's been back, they just have a different little, like a buzz, like no pun intended, or like an electric little spark because he just brings that intensity. I mean, he just played his brother last night or 2 nights ago, and him and Lonzo were going at it.
Yeah,
just the kid is very poised for the position that he's in, and I think that Charlotte being in the position that they're in, and Boston being in the trending downward position that they're, I just see, I see the Hornets kind of taking that position from them if it were to end today.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what Boston's going to be because like let's say this, let's just say it for hypothetical purposes here. Let's say Boston loses that 7-8 matchup against Charlotte. They would more than likely have to play the Wizards. Because I think the Wizards, if they were to play the Pacers in that 9-10 series, in that 9-10 matchup, I think the Wizards beat the Pacers. And I'll be honest, I don't think really anybody wants to go up against the Wizards right now because have you been watching what freaking Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal have been putting on night in and night out? I mean, Russell's going out there and getting 15-plus rebounds and assists almost on a nightly basis. You got Bradley.
I think like 5-6 games he's averaging like I think 20-something, 15 and 15. It's ridiculous.
Bradley Beal just dropped 50 the other day when Russell scored I think like 30 plus.
33, 15, and 19.
These are just mind-boggling numbers here.
Video game numbers.
If those guys are averaging 80 points between the two of them, Boston, there's no way that Boston can compete with that. And that's if Boston plays somewhat decent defense. And their defense has been shaky pretty much the entire season. So,
and Jaylen's their best defender, and he's a guard. He would have to guard either Bradley or Russell, and they don't have him anymore with Kemba being the liability that his is. I think Russell goes off.
Oh, yeah. Russell could go out there and get 40 against Kemba if he wanted to. But he would do more to kind of get some rebounds, get some assists, get some guys open for some good looks. So it would really kind of be all dependent on what Russell would want to do against that matchup against Kemba. But I just don't think it's in the cards for Boston this year. I think if they make it out of the play-in tournament, it's probably the best that they're going to get because after that, they're either going to have to play the Nets or the 76ers. And that's going to be a
sweep.
Really, yeah.
It's a sweep. Either way, it's a sweep.
They'd be lucky to win one game against those teams.
I don't think they get one. James Harden comes back this week. Philly is firing on all cylinders on an 8-game win streak. It's just no shot.
And I don't like being negative. I really don't.
No, I don't either. I like to be optimistic in certain senses, but when you lose your best defender and your second leading scorer at the literal end of the year, bro, that's like you have a patch on your tire on a road trip and you're legit maybe like a couple of miles away and the tire goes flat. Like there's no air left.
Mm-hmm.
What else can go wrong for them? Kemba's been in and out of the lineup all year. He hasn't been producing since he's been on Boston. Jason Tatum is shouldering the load alone. Tristan Thompson looks like a waste of a signing. And the list goes on and on. The defense is just not there. Brad Stevens' job has been put into question this offseason. Maybe he's on the hot seat or not. Danny Ainge has been put into question for all of those acquisitions or lack thereof with the trades and the draft picks that they've had over the last 5 years. Boston has just basically like self-imploded. If we're being honest, this last season. Last year, they were in a great position to go out there and go into the Eastern Conference Finals, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah. And you look at some of the departures. Gordon Hayward. He was okay for Boston. He was inconsistent though in his time there, but he's having a resurgent year in Charlotte. And I will say that I didn't actually mind the Evan Fournier trade back in,
I didn't either.
What was it? 2
back
months
in March?
ago? Yeah, it was like 2 months ago. So I didn't necessarily mind that trade. It just really hasn't panned out the way that I thought it would for Boston. It's just, I think they made that move simply because I think that they thought that like the defense is just not going to be that good this year, and we're going to have to get the offensive production from somewhere. And Fournier is a decent option to score. When he was with Orlando, he was a great scorer for them, really, between him and Vucevic. So
yeah, they were great.
So it just really hasn't translated over in Boston, and it's just going to be a really tough hill for Boston to climb here. And I just don't think it's in the cards for them this year. And I hate being that negative, but that's just the reality of how I see it.
Yeah, no, there's not. Excuse me. In that case, it's not necessarily negativity. I mean, I don't think even if Jaylen was on this team, I don't think they're going to combat the top 3 seeds in the East. Excuse me. They might get a game or two because of the firepower of Jason Tatum and Jaylen, but there was no way they're beating Brooklyn or Philly in a 7-game series. So we all knew that the way that they were struggling defensively, if they did line up against Brooklyn, we already know Brooklyn's having one of the most historic, prolific offensive seasons in the league. Mm-hmm. With the terrible defense that Boston's providing. That's like gasoline on an already torched fucking forest. I genuinely think that Boston would just get absolutely obliterated off the face of the earth in a 7-game series.
Yeah.
If they were to face one of those top 2 seeds.
At the most, it's a 5-game series. Realistically, it's probably a sweep, like you said.